hello, and a very warm welcome to this latest edition of Talking Germany, the show where we do just that. And let me put my cards on the table right at the beginning of the show. I love chocolate, and today's show is all about chocolate because my guest is Alfred Ritter. He is the CEO of the iconic German chocolate manufacturer Ritter Sport. Here he is in person. Welcome to Talking Germany. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much for coming all the way to Berlin. Yeah. Now, what makes Ritter, the company, such an interesting company, apart, that is, from the fact that it is very tasty, both in terms of taste and design, is that it is so very typical of the kind of family-based companies that are widely seen as the backbone of the German economy. Companies that make up what is called here in Germany the Mittelstand. So I'm going to begin straight off, Mr. Ritter, by asking you to tell us what the Mittelstand is, because it's a very important thing to understand about Germany.
Yes, the German Mittelstand originated mainly from within the skilled trades. In Germany, we have a dual training and education system for this kind of work, so it's theoretical and practical. That's why in Germany, people who work in the trades are really well educated, and they're the Mittelstand. They have lots of specialized knowledge, but they're business savvy as well. Companies where people who are good at their trades are usually a bit bigger, and that's how Germany's SMEs grow. Usually, growth is based on expert knowledge in a special area. Take my family. My grandfather was a trained confectioner, and my grandmother had a candy store. That's how they met. Later, my grandfather learned to make chocolate, but at first he made only sweets. Our company grew from his ability and knowledge of these trades.
Aus diesem handwerklichen Fachkönnen ist die Firma erwachsen.
And
that's a typical way that Germany's economy grew.
Absolutely. And a very typical company, not just for the German Mittelstand, but a typical company for the region that you come from, which is Swabia. Yeah? Tell us where Swabia is, what Swabia is.
Swabia is in southwestern Germany. It's affected by the fact that it was very poor for a long time. And as a result, its economy has been influenced by the skilled trades. There are two factors. One was a custom of estate distribution. Farms were divided again and again among children, so the fields became smaller and smaller, and people had to live from less and less. So, of course, they had to become very efficient. And many Swabians emigrated. They could be found all over the world today because it was simply too poor at home. The other issue was the King of Württemberg, who really exploited his subjects. That's why the Swabians have trouble dealing with authority even today. Because they had to be efficient, they developed a great deal of ingenuity. That's why Swabians today are known for their quality mechanical engineering and the many small family firms that are global market leaders in their extremely small niches.
Okay. We've talked about industry, we've talked about manufacturing, we've talked about your company and the tradition of the company, we've talked about Swabia. Let's talk about chocolate before we really get going. I'm a chocolate fan, yeah, but tell me how I know the difference when I've got chocolate in my hand between good chocolate and bad chocolate.
Probieren Sie es einfach.
Just give it a try. Taste is what chocolate is all about, and I'm convinced that when you have Ritter Sport chocolate, you'll discover that it's hard to find another chocolate in the world that's as good.
Sie haben Mühe, auf der ganzen Welt so gute Schokolade zu finden.
Okay. We might just put that to the test. Yeah. You've had your first impressions there from Alfred Ritter. Here is more.
A chocolate maker doing what he likes best.
That's definitely a truffle.
Testing chocolates in the laboratory. Tasting can be hard work. How much chocolate does he actually eat in a day?
Well, that depends. There are days when we do taste tests, and that can be a lot. Several squares a day, but normally just half a one.
Waldenbuch in Baden-Württemberg is home to the Ritter Sport factory. And here's the boss doing something he likes less, office work.
I always have way too much mail that keeps me from my work. Reading it can be a waste of time.
What kinds of mail do you get?
The minutes of the latest meeting, then something about a new peanut. What do we got here? Some publishing house that wants something from me. Invitation to film awards. I'm not a film lover. And it just goes on, one after the other.
Und so geht's halt weiter, eins nach dem anderen.
Actually, Alfred Ritter is a psychologist by profession, but in 2005 he took over the management of the family company.
I no longer really agreed with some of the ways that the company was being run, and that led to the departure of the chairman. And in order to be able to implement my ideas without an intermediary, I decided to do it myself.
Sometimes his pet dog Charlie helps out with tasting.
Now I'll probably get it in the neck from animal rights activists.
And what's Charlie's favorite flavor?
Milk chocolate. He and I are in complete agreement on that.
As a sideline, Ritter also runs a heating and solar energy company. In 1997, he was even honored as Eco-Manager of the Year. But with more than 300 million euros in sales and 1,000 employees, his chocolate factory is his biggest undertaking. How often has he visited the production line?
I couldn't count the times. I worked here on my school holidays. As a very small child, I used to pick my father up for breakfast. So I couldn't say.
On this day, the company is producing Alpine milk chocolate, a bestseller in Germany, which remains Ritter's main market. The square shape of the chocolate bars is one of the hallmarks of their success. Quality in a square is the slogan. It was his grandmother's idea, a stroke of marketing genius. But the German market is extremely competitive, so Alfred Ritter is now focusing more on sales abroad. Developing new varieties is also important, but unlike the earlier business manager, he doesn't want to follow every trend. And today, he's our guest on Talking Germany, Alfred Ritter.
And Alfred Ritter, I would like to go back to your very early days, you as a little boy, picking your dad up from work. Yeah, it's a very evocative image. Tell me a little bit about what that was like. Yeah?
I grew up in a small house next to the chocolate factory, spent my early years there. As soon as I could walk, I went a few steps further to my father's office in the factory. I'd go get him and bring him home for lunch. So I was already in the chocolate factory back then. I watched them making bunnies out of sugar and other things. It was a part of my home.
It's interesting because, I mean, you grew up with the smell of chocolate, with the taste of chocolate, you must have known quite early that there was a dynasty in the family. Yeah? What kind of feeling did that give you, to be the next person in the dynasty? You must have known that at a very young age, I would guess.
Ja, das ist sehr zweigeteilt.
That's very ambivalent. On the one hand, you've got an assured future. On the other hand, there's a great deal of pressure. I often went back and forth about what to do with my life. But I had a very good relationship with my father, even later on. Unfortunately, he died quite young. I was just 20 years old, and it was a major disaster for me. At the age of 20, I wasn't yet in any position to run a chocolate factory. And even if I could have, people just wouldn't have believed such a young man would be up to it. So there were different reasons why I didn't step in. They brought in management from the outside, which was necessary, and they set up an advisory board, originally made up of my father's friends. I cooperated with them and helped to make it work out. And then later on, 4 years later, I became an advisory board member myself. 6 years after that, I became chairman. That was in 1985. And since then, I've pretty much continually been chairman of the advisory board.
You missed out a chapter in your own development there. I can't remember what year it was, but you went away to Heidelberg as a young man, yeah, to study.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you began to study economics, and then you changed course. Why?
Ja, ich habe Volkswirtschaft studiert und
I studied economics because we had a company back home, and I knew quite a bit about it. And I often couldn't stand the nonsense talked in class. I'm mathematically inclined, and they took the third derivative of the inverse demand function, and I thought that if we could predict 1 point on the inverse demand function, then it would really be progress. And then I decided not to waste my time in intellectual ivory towers that are so divorced from reality, and I got an undergraduate degree. Today they'd call it a bachelor's. And I left the program.
Also heute wird man sagen Bachelor, und habe dann abgebrochen.
And then you studied psychology.
Und dann habe ich
I went on to study psychology because I was trying to find out more about people, to find out about why they talk about such things, and like to be surrounded by certainties that don't actually exist.
That's an interesting point, yeah. And then you had to be, there was the crisis in the company that you've described. There was turbulence in the company. And you were drawn back into the company. It almost sounds like a kind of a novel by Thomas Mann or something, where there's this tradition, the family dynasty, the family saga, and you're drawn, you got away from it, and you're drawn back into it.
Ja, ich habe nicht so sehr lange mich
I didn't study psychology for very long because I come from a family of entrepreneurs. And at some point, it was time to start a business. So I founded Ritter Energy and Environmental Technology. It was after Chernobyl, because at that time I said we have to change our energy technology. We focused on heating technology, solar heating in particular. The company still exists. It employs 350 people in Europe and more than 1,000 in China.
Und in China noch mal über 1.000.
Alfred Ritter, let me interrupt you. Let's talk about that later. I want to come back to that point. You went away from the company.
Ja.
And then you got dragged back.
Ja,
Vida villains, against your will, you said at some stage. Yeah, well, tell me, what happened?
Nein, ich war ja dann im Beirat. Ja?
By then I was on the advisory board and things were working well. They gave me plenty of space.
Und es gab immer
There was always a managing director, and I was chairman of the advisory board. I wasn't really outside of the firm, but in it.
Und weil ich da Zeit hatte, habe ich auch andere
Nevertheless, I still had time to start another company because the work on the advisory board took only about 3 days a month.
Das lässt Zeit.
That gave me time.
Aber dann habe ich leider einen Geschäftsführer zusammen mit
Then, unfortunately, my sister and I employed a managing director who took the company in a direction that I felt had no future.
die ich nicht mehr für zukunftsfähig.
And I saw trends that were not really heading the way the family would have liked. So I said if I wanted to change things, then I had to do it myself. About 8 years ago, I took over active management.
Das ist jetzt knapp 8 Jahre her. Und dann bin ich in die Geschäftsführung gegangen.
And now you are at the head of, I mean, there's been ups and downs, but you're at the head of what is a very successful, still a family company, in a very lucrative business where you're competing against global corporations sometimes, yeah? Tell me what the big advantage is of being a family company still. Tell me what the big disadvantage is.
Also der große
The
Vorteil
big advantage, we don't have to publish quarterly results or justify our actions to shareholders. I say that as a family, you always have unlimited potential to weather setbacks. If we fail to make a profit for a year or two, we don't have to tell the world about it. So we can take a much more long-term approach to company development and make major investments for the future. We think in long cycles.
Richtig große Investitionen in eine gute Zukunft. Wir denken in langen Zyklen.
And what's the big disadvantage?
Der große Nachteil ist,
The big drawback is that we can't make any mistakes. We just don't have the capitalization that major companies have. They can really make a mess and the company will continue to exist, but that's not the case for us.
und das wäre bei uns nicht der Fall.
Okay. We've seen you as a young boy picking your dad up from work. We've seen you going off to Heidelberg and studying psychology and coming back to the company. What are your qualities as a manager, as a senior manager, as the man who has responsibility for this company? What are your special qualities?
Also,
Well, I'll say two things. I love the company.
That's a good start. That's a good start. Yeah.
Und ich bin nicht so sehr interessiert an Geld, sondern an funktionierenden Unternehmen.
And I'm not particularly interested in money. Instead, I want a company that works. I pay lots of attention to maintaining a functioning company system. That's my primary job. Especially with respect to Ritter Sport, there are three people, who know the brand well. An ancient brand manager, who helped create Ritter Sport, and my sister and I. We know the brand, and we know how to manage it.
Und meine Schwester und ich, wir kennen die Marke und wissen, wie man sie führt.
Truly a company from the German Mittelstand. We've come back to where we started. Now, the story of Ritter Sport began in 1912. We've heard a little bit about it already. Let's go right back now to the early days. Alfred Ritter, at the beginning of that report, we heard about your grandparents, your legendary grandparents, I'd have to say, who actually sort of set up the company back then in 1912. I don't think you got to know them really properly. What can you tell us about them, nevertheless? What is the sort of the family legend about them?
Ja gut, persönlich habe ich meinen Großvater nicht mehr kennengelernt.
I never met my grandfather. He died a year before I was born. I can remember a bit about my grandmother. She was around until I was 6, and she sold chocolate in her little candy store right up to the end.
In the report, it is said that the marriage between the two of them was a love match. It was a real... They fell in love with each other. How did they meet? How did that all come about?
My grandmother had a candy store, and my grandfather was a confectioner. He made sweets, and that's how they met.
A match made in heaven, yeah? Too good to be true.
Das war dann auch gut, man hat sich so kennengelernt.
And that was good. So they met and liked each other, and it was a good business model, too, because he was a good candy maker, and she sat at the cash register. That worked fine, and the shop grew. He was very talented. Many of his cake, liqueur, and candy recipes are still available, and there's a great deal known about him.
But this was, of course, 1912 when they got together. 2 years later, the First World War broke out. Did that have an impact?
Yes, that's really significant. My grandfather got drafted, but he wasn't really suited to being a soldier, so they sent him home right away and had him doing war work in what was then the SZ chocolate factory, which was also in Stuttgart. So then, after the First World War, he knew how to make chocolate, and he began making his own.
Und dann konnte nach dem Ersten Weltkrieg Schokolade machen und hat auch begonnen, eigene Schokolade zu produzieren.
I see. So the baker became a chocolate maker, in this process. And tell me this, because this is important. I mean, people outside Germany, when you say, you know, we've got this family tradition from 1912 until today, over 100 years, they're going to look at the period of the Second World War. They're going to look at the Nazi period, and they're going to say, what happened to the company then?
My grandfather, who was head of the company back then, was no fan of Hitler. And when he'd had a bit to drink, and he did that sometimes, he let people know about it.
Which could be very problematic and dangerous.
He was really well loved in the community. His company was confiscated, but my grandparents were allowed to stay in their home, which was attached to the factory. And because he was so popular, nothing more happened to him. My father was a soldier in World War II and was gone for a long time. He didn't return from being a prisoner of war until 1948.
Quite late, yeah.
And the company really didn't exist anymore at that point. I have a diary entry that says the company had 5 workers, 3 managers, he, his mother, and father.
Seine Mutter und sein Vater.
I see. So really, ups and downs here, ups and downs, yeah?
Und da hat man wieder neu begonnen.
They had to start fresh after World War II. My grandfather was appointed mayor because he was not a Nazi, but he didn't stay in office long. He was soon back at his company. The first cocoa rations were issued in 1948 because there was really none available. A real supply of cocoa didn't begin again until the 1950s.
Yeah. Let's just go back in time one little bit, because your grandmother, who we mentioned, who had the little the store where she sold the candy, sold the chocolates. She was the person who came up with the idea of the square pack, of the square block of chocolate. Yeah, tell us about that. How she had the idea, how that came about in the first place.
That was still back at the original company location in the Stuttgart district of Bad Cannstatt. Their first shop was there on the Bahnhofstrasse near the railroad station. In those days, people wore sport jackets. Maybe you remember them from movies.
I'm not sure. When you say in German a sports jacket, what exactly is that? That's with the pockets are sewn on.
That's right. You could see them in the films. They had patch pockets. They weren't jackets you'd wear to a ball. They were for cycling, traveling. That's when people wore them. And they started making a square chocolate bar that fit perfectly in that kind of pocket. That was Ritter Sport chocolate because it fit in a sport jacket pocket.
And this was a moment of absolute genius because this is what made the company what it still is today. Do you think the company would have been as successful if you'd had conventional oblong blocks of chocolate, bars of chocolate?
The company would probably no longer exist.
We've talked a little bit about production. We've talked, I suppose the three aspects of your company are production, manufacturing, there's sales and distribution. There's also raw materials. That's an interesting area. And a lot of your raw materials must come from the Southern Hemisphere, must come from places like Africa and Asia and Latin America. And there are all sorts of tricky issues around that because they do the work, they do the hard work in the fields, and people in Germany, in your factory, they add the added value and make the profits. How do you confront those issues?
First of all, I've got to say that most of our raw materials come from Germany. Milk and sugar, of course. But we also purchase some things from other countries that are not so problematic. Almonds and raisins from California, for example. So not everything is problematic. But most of the cocoa comes from West Africa, and the social situation isn't good there at all. There's child labor. The people are truly impoverished, and little is paid for cocoa. But we can't disengage ourselves from that because cocoa is sold on the global commodities markets. And that's where we buy it as well. The only way we can get away from that is by setting up our own projects. We've got one in Nicaragua, where we've long been cooperating with farmers that we've trained. We've got very good ties to the government, and it works well. Now we bought land that was forest before it was cleared by slash and burn methods for grazing. Now we're trying to reforest it to create a cocoa mixed forest. It's an agroforestry project. So not cocoa monoculture, but with diverse trees, but with a greater proportion of cocoa trees, of course.
Mm-hmm. And how much of the raw cocoa beans would you then be able to take from this source of supply?
When it's up and running, we expect to be able to get around 30% of our cocoa paste from it. But we've still got to buy some cocoa butter. And if you're really precise about the cocoa, then it's a bit less than 30%. But from the cocoa paste that gives the chocolate its taste, it's around 30%. The aim of our brand is to make it the very best for every type of chocolate. And that starts out with the fermentation of the cocoa, how it's dried. That's why we go to where it's raised. There will be different social standards on this plantation. We'll pay the people properly and protect our workers. It will be different.
Okay. That's your job. It would be our job in the media to make sure that you keep that promise. Now, Germany, I think it is fair to say, is still doing well as a manufacturing nation in the economic crisis that we're still going through here in Europe and elsewhere. And as a result, the economy is still one of the strongest in Europe. Still, millions of people, a growing number, it seems, suffer from depression. Before we talk about how all this fits together, we've got this report.
I was miserable, exhausted, so stressed out I just couldn't go on.
At consumer products giant Unilever in Hamburg, workers can speak openly about a subject that's still taboo in many other companies. When employees feel overwhelmed or unable to cope, company doctor Olaf Czarnecki takes action. He and his colleagues offer things like in-house fitness programs to help employees achieve better work-life balance. That's vital in today's fast-moving world.
These days, we can no longer just sweep the problem under the carpet. We can no longer afford to ignore anguish, depression, and extreme fears. In the environment we're in, they quickly render us unable to function.
Big global corporations like Unilever can't afford to be idle. The communications director knows that in Germany, 1 in every 10 people on sick leave has a psychological, not physical condition. That has a negative effect on productivity and profits. Unilever sees promoting health management as a solution.
If we deal with it openly, that gives employees the chance to talk to us about a whole range of problems. Everything from mild depression to drug issues. Ultimately, an employee who's physically and mentally fit does the best work for us.
Unilever offers its staff the chance to seek help from experts at the Fürstenberg Institute. Just coming here and admitting he was suffering from depression was tough for this Unilever employee, even though his employer wasn't informed. Finally, he was able to talk about his problems in confidence.
For me, it was a lifeline to help me get out of this situation.
Patients are treated by a team of psychologists, social workers, and educators. Companies pay a monthly fee based on the number of employees. Shell, Metro, and E.ON are among the leading corporations on the Institute's growing list of clients.
Increasingly, we're seeing senior executives and board members suffering from burnout. That was unheard of 4 or 5 years ago. It's something new. And as bad as it sounds, it has the advantage that once executives are affected, they show more understanding for their workers.
Mehr Verständnis für Arbeitnehmer da ist, wenn auch das Management davon betroffen ist.
And accepting the illness is the first step to a cure.
What we learned from that report is that a lot of companies are seeking external help. They're seeking counselling and therapy facilities and assistance from specialists. And that's obviously a requirement that is growing. What is going wrong? What's the problem?
Ja, also in
many companies, the work culture won't help prevent you from getting sick. That's a real issue for me. Stepping in much earlier to ensure that people enjoy their work, because only when they enjoy it do you get top performance, and that's really in the company's interest. This enjoyment is created by allowing a certain degree of freedom and creating a comfortable workplace where people are valued and not under pressure. Pressure is not the way to do it. In today's economy, a lot of things concern pressure, and more pressure, and that doesn't work. Pressure can be used to prevent behaviors, not foster them. So we're trying to create a positive atmosphere at the company. I always say if the people go to the plant faster in the morning than they go home in the evening, then things are going well.
Okay, so you're making a big claim there that you're getting something right that maybe other companies are not getting right. Tell me, give me a concrete example for something that you do different from other companies of your size or maybe in your, your sector, whatever.
There
are quite a few things, and I really can't bring any of them to the fore. But we offer a great deal of opportunity for further education and training. We work hard to see that management is trained, because a company is only as good as its bosses. If just one person is treated badly, then it's uncomfortable for the entire company. We do a great deal to prevent interdepartmental conflict, so no one's running around talking about the dummies in accounting. There's lots of lateral movement where people change departments. We really promote that. We try to do it in a way that's really employee-friendly. For example, if someone becomes pregnant or has a child, they won't have any problem getting their job back or a part-time job. We make a serious effort to achieve this, and it works in all cases.
Das funktioniert in allen Fällen.
That's all interesting, but I think a lot of our foreign viewers will be looking at or listening to this discussion and still thinking, OK, that sounds good, yeah, and probably is good. But Germany is such a wealthy country. In international comparison, the number of people who are suffering from depression is increasing. You've mentioned pressure as one factor, but how do you explain that? We live in a country of wealth, and we're becoming less and less happy with what we have around us. Why? You studied psychology. You're not just a business manager.
Also,
I can only talk about what's probably one aspect. I think it's important, but it's not the whole story. It comes from being distanced from tangible reality. Many people rarely cook for themselves anymore. They often don't have any children and have little to do with the natural environment. People lose the point of things, and humans need orientation and social belonging. That's difficult, and at work, it's often not present at all. If there's mobbing on the job, or if someone is doing a task that they don't understand the purpose of, then things get stressful. It's a strain and leads to depression.
Und dann wird es zum Stress, und dann wird es zur Anstrengung, und dann führt es in die Depression.
And what about you? I mean, you've got the responsibility for this company. You've got almost, not quite sole responsibility, but you've got responsibility in a very unique way. You're responsible for your employees. You've got another couple of companies you've already mentioned outside Ritter Sport chocolate, yeah? Are you a balanced and relaxed individual, or do you have moments of terrible, terrible stress, like I do sometimes?
That's a personal matter. But of course, I'm not always just fine.
What do you do?
Ich versuche es mir viel gut gehen zu lassen.
I try to be really good to myself, because only a boss who's good-humored is friendly. And a friendly boss makes for a friendly company, and that's necessary for high performance. I've got to be good to myself. There is no other way. I take lots of walks, vacation frequently, and spend lots of time with my family. That brings me back into balance really well. And I have a job about which I say, there's no product more charming than chocolate. And that's fun.
Kaum ein charmanteres Produkt als Schokolade. Und das macht natürlich Spaß.
OK. Alfred Ritter has already told us that he's not just involved in chocolate, he's involved in issues around energy, especially around solar energy. And I have to tell you, Germany is in the middle of what is called here, I'm going to use the German word, the Energiewende. The word has been widely used in the English language media too, because it's very difficult to translate. In essence, it describes the total restructuring of the country's energy supply with a radical shift away from fossil fuels and nuclear energy towards renewable sources of energy like solar or wind power. It's very ambitious, and the one thing we know for sure about the whole project is it will not be cheap. Alfred Ritter, I think we heard in that report that 82% of people here in Germany support the Energiewende, this energy shift, energy reform here in Germany. And I'm sure you are one of them. I guess one of the most important moments in you developing your passion for the environment was what you mentioned earlier, Chernobyl, what happened there and what that meant for you as a person and for your company.
Ja, zunächst mal, als ich davon gehört
When I heard about it on the radio, I thought long and hard that something was going wrong, but it's a long way away.
aber es ist weit weg.
I didn't care very much, but then it turned out that a big radioactive cloud was heading for the southern coast of the Black Sea,
Eine große
so moving into northern Turkey.
über die südliche Schwarzmeerküste, also
And that's the biggest hazelnut growing area in the world.
das größte Haselnussanbaugebiet der Welt.
That's where we also got our hazelnuts, and there wouldn't be any that weren't contaminated with radiation.
Big problem.
Und Ritter Sport, die beste
And Ritter Sport, the best kinds are whole nut, dark whole nut, rum raisin hazelnut.
Traubennuss.
Consumers eat lots of nuts, and they weren't available anymore.
Und das war ein Riesenproblem.
At first we tried almonds instead, and we rejected contaminated nuts. But that didn't really help much because they were just sold to people by other companies.
Und damals habe ich mir gesagt, diese
And that's when I said that this technology is anti-human, and it needs to be stopped.
und
And then I said, I'm not a politician. I'm not going to found a political party. Others have already done that. I'm a businessman. I'll set up a company and see to it that this technology becomes unnecessary. So I set up a discussion group with engineers, and they determined that it would be quickest and take the least possible effort to save energy in building and household technologies. Half of the energy that's consumed today goes for heating and cooling. Most people don't know that, and it's the place where you can achieve the best results with the least amount of cost and effort. So I set up a company that rationally uses fossil fuels in building technology and always uses thermal solar energy in heating systems from the outset. The company still exists, and it's grown. It makes me happy, and it's still growing.
It's interesting that you say all this, and I know that you see yourself as a little bit of an environmentalist. You know what I've got here? I've got one of your. Here's the package of Ritter chocolate that we've been talking about, the square packaging, yeah. And I've got the little ones here. And when I open it up, I know a lot of people. Somebody was saying this to me the other day. You open it up, and you've got all this packaging, yeah. And you're sitting here. You're telling me you're the big environmentalist, and inside all the plastic and all the cardboard. More chocolate, more packaging. Can you tell me about that? Yeah? Looks like a problem to me.
I can tell you a lot about that. Let's start off with the big one, but I'll get to the little one right away.
You've got 1 minute.
The big one has about 1.4 grams of packaging. When we started out, the average weight of packaging for a 100-gram piece of chocolate was 4.5 to 5 grams. The product is recyclable.
Das Produkt ist recycelbar.
It's plastic, though. It's polyethylene, yeah? It's plastic.
Polyethylen.
Yeah.
Das ist recycelbar.
Polyethylene is recyclable, burns without emitting toxic fumes, and doesn't contaminate landfills. Today, I know of no better material for packaging chocolate. The competition is catching on slowly, but it's taken many years. Now let's move to this one. People like having smaller portions of chocolate too. Here we've used polyethylene wrap as well. It's recyclable, and here we've got the toughest part of all, where I've got to agree with you. Paper. It's not environmentally friendly. That's a small point where we have to say we're not as far along as we should be.
Okay. It's been great speaking to you. Yeah, I can hear the music. That's your lot with the thoughtful and multi-talented Alfred Ritter. What I'm going to do at the end of the show is I'm going to open up the bar of chocolate here. I know it's your favourite. Go on, show me how to do it properly. Yeah? Okay, let's have one piece each at the end of the show. Alfred Ritter. If you've enjoyed the show as much as I have, come back next week, and you can also read my archive and my blog on the website. Bye-bye for now. Thank you very much.